This is video 15 in the series What's So Hard About Translation? Video 14 ended with a series of questions for you to consider. The point, of course, was not that some answers are right and others wrong, but that for most of the choices you were asked to make, you actually did have preferences, some stronger than others. The fact is, though, that somewhere in the world there are people whose preferences are different than yours, and who would have answered these questions by choosing one of the other options. Where do these preferences come from? While a few might be chalked up to personal choice, most of what you chose could be predicted based on your family background and where you grew up. This is the impact of culture. While each question focused on a choice regarding an isolated thing, quality, or action, each action or thing is not actually isolated from the rest, but fits into culturally conditioned patterns that we may not even be consciously aware of. Some of these patterns are sequences of events like the Thanksgiving and football narratives that we considered in video 13. For example, a birthday cake is a typical part of a yearly celebration that also typically includes blowing out candles, giving presents, and singing Happy Birthday. The giving of a diamond ring is a typical step in a sequence that moves from a first meeting to marriage. Cakes and rings are both things that are found in other contexts, but take on special significance when part of these patterns. These kinds of cultural patterns take some time to learn as children and other newcomers observe sequences of actions that are repeated over time. In the process, we develop a sense of what is normal and of which variations of normal patterns fall within the realm of acceptability and which do not. So, for example, if we show up to a birthday party to find a pie with candles sitting on the table but no cake, we know that the normal pattern is not being followed. But we will probably not be offended by this deviation from the norm. We would be deeply offended, however, if we showed up at Thanksgiving to find that the host had replaced the turkey with a cat. In the same circumstances, a visitor with no prior knowledge of our culture might find everything strange, but would have no way of knowing if any part of what she saw was normal or abnormal. Equipped with the knowledge of how things normally happen in our world, we can come upon scenes like these and guess with pretty fair accuracy the sequence of events that led up to this state and what will follow. We will also have a sense for the kinds of people that were most likely involved and what motivated their actions. Another kind of cultural pattern is when a given thing, word, or action has similar significance in a wide variety of circumstances. Standing up, for example, is an action that shows respect, not only when a judge enters a courtroom, but also when a bride enters a church or a hostess leaves the table. The use of the color red to signal danger, green safety, and yellow caution is the same in a wide range of circumstances. Quite often, these two kinds of patterns, we'll call them sequential and distributed patterns, intersect in multiple ways, and in the process imbue everyday objects with particular significance. As an example of this, let's think about the significance of cake. It is not too unusual to find cake as part of an everyday meal, where it's just another dessert, like pie or cookies. From among all the other desserts, however, it is the one that is typically featured in various celebrations. Typically, cake features at retirement celebrations, birthday parties, graduations, and wedding receptions, but not so often at funerals, Valentine's, or Christmas. Is there some feature common to the 4 cake-eating events that is missing in the other 3? Retirement, birthdays, weddings, and graduations have at least 3 features in common. Someone is passing from one socially recognized state to another, people have gathered to recognize the occasion, and people are happy about it. While funerals do mark the transition of one state to another, and people have gathered to acknowledge the transition, the people in attendance typically do not see the transition as a happy one. Funeral cakes do exist, though, and used to be commoner than they are today, particularly in traditions where people believe they would be seeing their dear departed again in a future life. Funerals don't perfectly fit the pattern of cake-eating celebrations in our culture, so you'll find different subcultures putting the event in different categories. In general, then, cake features in celebrations that mark a significant change of status, that it is acknowledged by the community. While pie or cookies may also be on offer, they aren't mandatory and don't carry the message that cake does. Why is this? Is there some intrinsic quality of cake that makes it an ideal vehicle to communicate change of status, or has it only acquired this significance through customary association? Many social patterns signal the nature of relationships between people within a culture. Some of the most basic patterns have to do with proximity. For example, how far away should people be when they talk to each other? The answer to that, even within a culture, depends on the nature of their relationship. Research has shown that most middle-class North Americans feel very uncomfortable when strangers or casual acquaintances get physically closer than about an arm's length away when facing each other. More intimate relationships, such as family, permit people to get closer without discomfort. Intentionally getting physically closer to someone than this limit allows usually signals a desire to change the relationship, one way or another. On one hand, it may signal a desire to become more intimate. However, it may also be considered an act of aggression, a literal manifestation of the expression to get in someone's face. Actual physical contact between people is also culturally scripted. For example, in America, who holds hands? Families, kindergartners, and couples that are romantically involved. While girls in some places may hold hands to signal friendship, guys who are friends typically do not. In our culture, a typical gesture of friendship between guys is to put arms around each other's shoulders or to initiate brief instances of restrained violence. The nature of our relationships is also signaled by the ways that we address one another. Terms of address signal degrees of social intimacy or social hierarchy. For example, Mary Smith may be alternatively addressed as Mary, Mrs. Smith, Dr. Smith, Ma'am, Sweetie, Mom, Your Honor, Girl, Sister, Woman, or Dingbat. Each of these conveys a degree of intimacy or social distance, and each of these may or may not be appropriate depending on the nature of the relationship that Mary Smith has with the person addressing her and the setting in which the interchange is taking place. For example, it may be appropriate for a spouse or parent to address Mary as Sweetie while at home, but for a lawyer or plaintiff to address a presiding judge as Sweetie in a courtroom conveys contempt, and while addressing someone in court as Your Honor might be appropriate, what might it convey to do so at home? Like changes of proximity, changing the way we address someone signals a desire to change the nature of the relationship we have with that person. And, like changes to proximity, these changes might be considered as affirmations or attacks, depending on the terms used and the context they're used in. By and large, no one gives us lessons on what degrees of proximity mean or how and when to use most terms of address. These are things we pick up as we live life in a particular culture. It is a safe bet that the rules for these things will be different in other cultures. Things, actions, and words not only signal relationships between two people, but also between an individual and the rest of society. Janitors, judges, priests, and policemen all wear clothes that signify the roles they play. The spots where teachers place their desks, CEOs have their offices, and coaches stand on the sidelines all help identify them as people with authority. A policeman's badge, a doctor's diploma, and a teenager's driver's license all imply public endorsement of their capacities. Important changes of status are both culturally regulated and publicly acknowledged. Things like graduation, marriages, and inaugurations have legal, social, and often religious ramifications. Each involves a protracted, ritualized ceremony that includes the participation of a conferring authority figure and community members. This ensures the cultural legitimacy of the change of status. Some status changes, like legally becoming an adult, are almost automatic. Others, like graduation or getting a job, require deliberate effort. Some statuses can be challenged. Most societies have developed ways to mitigate the potential violence that sometimes accompanies these challenges. Elections, lawsuits, and prize fights are all ways that challenges to position and power are ritually decided in America. Another way to think about the status accorded to people in a culture is to consider access to places and activities. Can everyone go anywhere and do anything they want in our society? For example, who can come into your home and under what circumstances? Which entrance to the house would you prefer your kids use? How about your boss or your pastor? How about the plumber? Are all your visitors welcome in all of your rooms? Do you wear the same clothes and shoes inside that you wore outside? If not, why not? How about public spaces? What spaces are restricted? Restrooms are separated by gender. Why is that? Minors are not allowed in bars. Why is that? Can the public wander around schools, hospitals, prisons, pharmacies? Why is access to these places restricted, and what is required to gain access to them? Underlying the way we organize our society are the values that our society considers important, which values are reflected in the restrictions we put on access to places. Privacy seems to be one. How about safety? Safety has become more and more important over the past few decades. We increasingly require government and corporations to keep us safe. This is reflected in the growing number of barriers to access in public places, the warnings on the labels of consumer goods, and in lawsuits against corporations that have failed to protect consumers from harm caused by their products. Our values are also reflected in what we eat. Remember the question about which you prefer to eat, cows or cats? It's a pretty good bet that the vast majority of you who are not vegetarians chose the cow and were at least a little repulsed by the thought of eating a cat. Why is that? Consider the animals North Americans eat most often. What do they have in common? For one thing, they can be raised in large numbers and are easily controlled. Generally, they are not given names and don't have much of a relationship with the people who are raising them. Traditionally, they were kept near people's houses, but were not allowed to enter them. Contrast those animals with these. These animals are given names, quite often live in the house with people, and are often treated as family. What about horses? While they are too big to live in houses with people, they are usually given names. They also often serve as co-workers with people, and, like dogs, have even been the stars of movies and sitcoms. Some horses are even sports heroes. While eating these animals may not be illegal, we feel that doing so is a violation of bonds of trust and affection. We are likely to feel that there must be something seriously wrong with someone who would do such a thing, and treat them with fear and suspicion. We don't eat these animals either, but for different reasons. Instead of affection, these animals typically evoke fear and disgust. They can carry disease or deliver venomous bites, and tend to lurk in hidden corners. They too find their way into our houses, but are not invited to do so. They resist all efforts at control. Are there underlying values that inform our decisions about which animals we will or won't eat? There seems to be an interplay between several. We don't eat the animals that we treat as pseudo-humans for the same reason we don't eat our siblings and neighbors. We feel like it's wrong to eat beings that are too much like us, and we'd be really upset if they tried to eat us. The animals that disgust us, on the other hand, get a pass because we want to avoid being polluted by them. This is the same reason we wash our hands and leave muddy boots in the garage. When we see things and people and activities that are part of our culture, we not only know what they are, we also know where they fit in the patterns that structure our lives. We know their significance. We know if what we're looking at is normal or deviant. We have a feeling for what it indicates about the relationships of the people involved and can make judgments regarding whether it's right or wrong. If we dig down to the basis of those judgments, we'll find the values that are important to us and to the people that share our culture. In our next video, number 16, we'll explore some challenges that the things we know about our own culture create for understanding those of other people.